Hi, and welcome to our end of the year panel on Transit Unplugged. I'm Paul Comfort, your host, and it's exciting to be with you today with some of our regular contributors who are going to share with you what we think about what's happening in trends in the new year. Tris?
And I'm Tris Hussey, the producer. Yeah, we're recording this early in December, playing this at the end of the year. This is going to be literally the last show of 2021.
That's right. And it's been a big year for us, Tris. And I want to acknowledge you coming on board this year as producer of the show. You've really helped improve the sound quality and the professionalism of the show. Thank you for that. Okay. And when we were talking about a way, you're welcome. We were talking about a way to kind of do a nice wrap up. This was your idea. You said, why don't we get some of our regular contributors together and talk about what are the trends? What have we learned from 2021 and what are we looking forward to in 2022? So I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say.
Oh, me too. And, we asked this question on LinkedIn. And the last time I checked, the two things that were like up there is like microtransit and faring. Those were the two big topics that people said, which is good because I stacked the deck. Honestly, yeah. I made sure the quiz questions would match what the topics we're talking about. But that's what people are interested in: microtransit and EV and faring. Those are the big
hot
things.
Topics, you're right. And to talk about that, as our guest today, we have Elea, Carey, who is a communications consultant. Those of you who are regular listeners to the podcast will recognize her voice. She has been on for well over a year now, maybe 2 years. Elea, thanks for being with us.
Happy to be here as always.
And then Mike Bismeyer, who reached out to me a couple years ago on one of those on-site trips I was doing to Western Canada when I always put out on LinkedIn, hey, I'm coming to town if you want to have coffee. And he took me seriously, and we became good buddies. He's regional sales director for Proterra. And Mike, you're talking to us on the road again today, right?
Yeah, and thanks for having me again, Paul. And yeah, still the best cup of coffee I've had in the last 2 years was that meeting we had. So it was great to be here today. And yeah, I'm remote today in Ontario, the life of the traveling salesman, as we all do. But great to be with you.
Well, yeah, and then also we've got with us my new buddy this year, Mike Dukart, who's director of sales for TripSpark. Mike's been helping me line up a lot of our guests for some of the mid-sized transit agencies, and a couple of them we did right at your booth there at APTA. Mike, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Paul. We had a good time, didn't we? And joining my buddy Mike here, we had a little bit of fun down there at APTA, joining him at the Proterra party. That was a whirlwind. I think we had a 55-minute stint there. We both had dinners to get to, but nonetheless, it was great hospitality, Mike.
Yeah, Mike, I'm telling you, that party you guys threw at APTA was the premier party that I got to go to. So phenomenal.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'll make sure we pass that on to our marketing team because I can take no responsibility for that. It's all on them. As we all know, great marketing teams typically make us all shine. So I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. It was a great time. It's just great to be in front of people again, for sure.
Yeah, it was fun to sing karaoke with a live band there. I mean, that was amazing.
I knew when I saw the itinerary that we would probably have Paul Comfort on stage just based on the itinerary.
Tris?
Okay, so now before we get going, Paul, speaking of APTA, we had the 5 leading women in transit in North America, and you summed up what you were hearing from them as the big trend. So let's listen to that clip, and then it happens to sink in with a lot of things we're talking about.
So what are the themes you've heard here? Microtransit, zero-emission buses, equity and inclusion, and people are still rebooting their bus routes. And so now, because the work patterns are changing, right? A lot of us have been working from home, and now we're not coming back 5 days a week. It's going to be hybrid. So the routes and how we're serving people are changing definitely. The faring models are changing, right? Because you don't want to just sell passes for 5 day a week. You want to be able to sell passes for maybe 3 day a week and do fare capping, all that kind of stuff. That's what's happening right now. People are changing their fixed route bus routes to model what the current patterns are. We don't have the peak of the peak in the AM and PM anymore.
Okay, well, that was great. Gee, those topics sound familiar.
It was great. It was great having 5 of the most powerful women in transit there with us. And hopefully the folks who listen to the podcast, if you haven't heard that one, you should go back and listen to that. And that'll also be the centerpiece for our 3rd episode of Transit Unplugged TV, which is coming up. You'll be hearing about it this month of December. You may have already heard about it. We have one episode coming about focused on Las Vegas for December. And then in January, another one. And then the 3rd one will be these 5 most powerful women and some other great interviews we did that Mike and I did while we were down at the APTA Expo.
Why don't we kick it off with Elea? What's your hot topic?
Well, normally I would be talking about communications and marketing, right? But fare capping, in my opinion, is such a big trend that I simply can't ignore it. And later we can talk about how we want to market it and how we want to communicate it. But right now, fare capping. So what is fare capping? We all know that the people who can least afford to ride transportation options are the heaviest users of our systems. And they also are very often the people who get the least value out of our fare systems. How does this work? I mean, I know when I was broke in riding transit, I didn't have $60 I could scratch together at the beginning of the month. And so I scratched together $1.50 or whatever it was. And I rode the bus that day. And the next day I figured out how to ride the bus the next day. And before you know it, at the end of the month, instead of spending that $60, I'd spent $80, maybe even $100 because I'd been riding that many times. So how do we prevent that problem? Fare capping is a really good and effective solution for that. And fare capping means that when somebody has spent as much as they would have spent on a pass, let's just call it in this instance a monthly pass, then they ride transit free for the rest of the month. As if they had already bought a pass. So they're basically paying as they go, which they would normally do anyway in their worst method of doing it. But they get the reward of free transit like everybody gets who has bought a pass once they've passed that price threshold. So Selena Barlow of Transit Marketing, she's done a lot of research and turned me on to a lot of stuff. And I'm very grateful for her help. And she's pointed out that it's pretty easy to implement. That if the system is already in place and you're already a customer of a technology provider like that, you could turn a switch and really basically with the permission of your board, you could conceivably have fare capping working for you right away, just like overnight. So the who's using it is.
Well, the question, it sounds great because Julie Tim of Richmond talked about this at Think Transit, Virtual Think Transit last year. Same idea. People who can least afford it pay the most. But I guess that it requires that you're going to have to roll out like a fare card, like something like the Compass card we have in BC and similar places to keep track of that. Because if you pay cash, there's no way to know, right?
Correct.
But that has questions for the unbanked, doesn't it?
It definitely has questions for the unbanked. And then we have to reach for larger technology solutions for the unbanked, right? And how do we help them? So yes, in order to have the current fare capping systems, what we need is some kind of smart interaction. And that might be a smart fare card, or it might be something that you have on your smartphone, right? To be able to do it. So it'd be interesting to hear, obvious technology and innovation leaders who are implementing it. For example, Transport for London and TriMet here in the States, I believe, is understood to be the first person who implemented fare capping. I know that they would have a lot of experience to share. Here in the Bay Area, Vallejo and Benicia, riders have access to fare capping, as do people in Monterey and Salinas, working with Carl Sidoric there. So I feel like we're on the cusp of a moment. And the thing you bring up, Tris, of having to, what do we do about the unbanked, and what do we do about people who don't have access to digital assets like a fare card, like a smart card or a smartphone? I bet we're going to be rolling into problem solving for those riders, because we're really just standing right on the cusp of fare capping as a major trend, getting them set up this year. I think that we're going to see a lot of adoption in 2022.
What a great trend! I think you're dead on there. That's a really good trend we're coming into. And for some reason, I've got a sneaking suspicion that Mike Bismeyer is going to be talking about a great trend of zero emission buses. Is that right, Mike?
That is right. It's an exciting time for sure. And before I get going, first and foremost, I'd be remiss if I didn't say congratulations to an exciting year for you, Paul, the Transit Unplugged team, all the announced changes and the momentum you continue to gain. And a big thanks to Tris, who, as you said, has come aboard. He's really been top-notch to deal with. And the Trapeze and Vontas teams for allowing you to continue to bring us amazing content and guests. It's a type of podcast you can miss a couple, which we wouldn't recommend, but you can miss a couple and you can jump right back in and you learn something every time. I often talk about mentorship and leadership in this industry, and there's no better place to hear from the best mentors and leaders than your Transit Unplugged podcast. So thanks for continuing to do what you do. And to Elea and Mike, our other guests today, best of the season to you and your family. Looking forward to chatting here. So always an honor. And we'll talk a bit about the zero emission excitement for sure. I would say that it's probably the time to be talking about zero emissions. It's the time to be in that space. From the funding, from the federal level on both sides of the border, it's fully supported by the governments that are in place, from the state, provincial, regional levels. You're seeing all sorts of endorsements. Many agencies already have their transition plans in place, and regional and committed and supported goals as well, which is really exciting. And we're in the development phase of that, right? So we're seeing multiple zero emission committees throughout the industry with our peers, sharing best practices and real-time learnings, which is also very exciting. And then, APTA was a real-time firsthand look at the excitement, because the zero emissions sessions were packed. And you could not walk past the booth without seeing a zero emissions option. It was very different from shows in the past where you'd have to go find the electric vehicle. That was not the case this time. So that's what's exciting. I think
it's happening all over the world too, right, Mike? I mean, in places
is.
like London, the mayor, and other places, they're all moving toward zero emission buses.
They are. I think a few years ago, the story you told when you walked into a transit agency was a large part of the pitch was explaining why for the propulsion. Now it's how do we do it, which is a much more interesting and more exciting conversation to have. And there are some key important factors no matter what propulsion system you're choosing. In that zero emission space, right? I mean, you want to choose the right partner, but you got to properly plan for the transition. And some of those key things, I would say right at the top, one of the hot topics under that ZEV movement is workforce development and upskilling of your workforce. Planning for that organizational change management. Making sure you have internal champions right from the get go. Engage the entire team, right? It's something that you want to champion and be successful. It is a journey, right? Definitely utility partnerships is another key thing that all agencies are probably having. I always find it amazing how transit pivots for sure. And now they're fully engaged. Agencies that are going zero emissions are engaged with their local utilities. They're having to have these conversations, understanding the needs, the timings of scaling these projects and what upgrades are needed at the site, construction projects that sort of align with it. So those are some of the important keys. And then I'd say the last item I'd say on this is fleet modeling. It's a key. So understanding data, which, you guys are in that space as well. It directly aligns with the utility conversations and the overall plan for what you're doing, right? And even our understanding is the upcoming Lono grant and the extra money that's there, but transition plans are part of that. It's one of the boxes you got to check. You got to have one. So, right sizing your fleet is key, and that, understanding the routes, the vehicle types, the charging strategy, on route, in depot, overhead, et cetera. And I mean, I know I'm talking, preaching to the choir for many people that are going down this path already, but for those that aren't, your peers are doing a lot of that work. So reach out to your peers. And the bus is the easy part, right? I mean, into the transit space, people have ordered buses for years. But there's a lot of other thought process that goes into this, but it is definitely an exciting time. And, not just in transit and other verticals we look around, right? From public works to just, local utility trucks,
school
and delivery trucks, school buses. Yep. I mean, it's everywhere, right? So it is great. There's momentum in all vehicle types, class sizes, and again, sustainability plans from all sorts of verticals. So it's definitely an exciting time. So I appreciate being here and be able to talk about it. Happy to help anybody. And I'd like to just end and say, you've had me on the podcast for a couple of years as well, Paul. It's been an honor to be there. And, I typically do the Mike's Kindest Minute. So I just want to say, everyone, enjoy the holidays, continue being kind, take time out to do something special for someone that's not as fortunate as you through the holidays. That opportunity will be there. So thanks as always. And zero emissions is where we are.
One of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on the podcast from the beginning, Mike, was your emphasis on that area. And during the peak of the pandemic, there was so much talk about, the impact it was having on people personally, and the lack of kindness that was shown in a lot of places. And I just read an article today on LinkedIn that said that one of the long-term impacts of COVID is going to be mental health issues that people have coming out of this, having kind of been quarantined and locked in and not been able to interact with others. So that's why I think your message is so important for us to continue to share. I truly believe that the reason why we do what we do is to help people, right? Public transit is here to help people access all of life's opportunities. And as part of that kind of motivation, I think that it also comes from a heart of kindness, which is exemplified in what you do. And congratulations to you this year on winning that Mahatma Gandhi Award there in Canada for the great work you've done across the country.
No, well, I appreciate it. And I agree, transit is the great equalizer, right? It gives everybody opportunity, and we're part of that piece. And it's a pleasure to be part of that.
All right, Tris, now you've become our resident expert on so many topics, writing blog posts for our companies on various things. What do you think is the hottest trends?
Oh, for me, it's data. And everyone is talked about this. And what I'm seeing and hearing across the board isn't just a reliance on data, because we've always relied on it. It's the integration of data, and it's using data in new, interesting, and unique ways. To me, that is really going to be the unifying hallmark of 2022. It brings in fare capping, how we deal with EVs, how Paul, I won't give away what you're talking about, but I know it relates to that too, because it all moves together in how we plan transit systems. To me, that's the thing. It's very exciting from the data geeks side of the thing, how easy these tools have become. I looked at from our earlier discussion this year with Tyler Vorak, who I'm talking to shortly, and Terry Bills of Esri. We were relating our personal experiences with GIS and how hard they were not that long ago. And now anyone can use these data tools. That's going to be the game changer. And that's what's going to help push transit forward, I really believe.
Yeah. What do you think about like the role of machine learning and artificial intelligence, Tris, when it comes to taking that data and making it more usable for our transit agencies and our customers?
That is going to be one of those aspects, is going to be crucial, but we also have to be very cognizant and careful about how we apply these advanced tools. Mostly in that it's from the old computer saying you garbage in, garbage out. And if you don't have good data and you're not vetting your data and making sure that there aren't weird, strange errors in there or in unintentional biases, say me parts, you're missing a data set that's crucial. Machine learning can not be helpful. It can be detrimental to transit planning. So that is, to me, we're doing great things in AI and machine learning. I mean, I think every other show, someone's talked about that that their agency's bringing in. But we have to be careful, and we have to make sure we watch what the results are and make sure they actually match with reality. I think that's really essential.
Yeah, like the implicit bias that goes into all that. I know you talked about that before on one of the shows, but I've been working this last week on editing the first episode of our Transit Unplugged TV show, which is a video podcast. And David Swallow, the deputy CEO of Las Vegas RTC, Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada, pointed out that machine learning is being used even on their traffic signals, how that it is, you're getting the flow of the traffic, and the artificial intelligence is saying, okay, turn red now, and that allows for this group to grow. So you don't have to sit at a traffic light, for a set amount of time anymore in some of these intersections. It will respond not just to someone who's, that yes, there's a car sitting there, but also it's learned at this time of day, every day, we need this much flow through to make this intersection the most efficient it can be. And then it's time to turn to the other. So there's a lot of powerful ways to use that. But like Elon Musk says, we have to be careful that they don't take over and we end up with a bunch of Terminators out there. So I don't know if he said it exactly that way, but we have to be aware of that.
That is exactly, it was David Swallow who I was thinking of with his example of intelligent traffic lighting systems, where it doesn't affect just one intersection, that it branches out. And what's the bubble effect? Yeah. One light cycle delay, how does that carry on? Okay, we have one more Mike to hear from, Mike Dukart.
I thought you. Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, listen, I'd be remiss this time of year if I didn't, wish everybody a happy holiday season. I know Mike, you spoke about it, but my urge would be go out and do something this holiday season for those less fortunate. Paul, I'd like to congratulate you. I spent a little bit of time now this year with you guys, and what an exciting time to celebrate and celebrate a new TV show as well. So saw your booth just rocking it after. That was really fun to watch for sure. So congratulations to you guys, to Tris as well. Keep up the good work, guys. Listen, I'll spin it a little bit different. I know, in the COVID times right now, we've all had to pivot a little bit. And I think, at the forefront of anybody's reinvention has been really trying to figure out what's important. I think the transit space is really understood now that customers come first, and it's like any industry. We got to think like a customer, act like a customer, and I think a lot of the technologies, a lot of the services are really geared towards that new generation. And so I think one of the things we think about here a lot about at TripSpark is mobility as a service, and really a subset of that is microtransit, right? So thinking about mass and what it does, it's really, you're thinking about what the customer's destination is rather than the mode of transportation, right? How do we get the customer there? What's about the customer? You think about things like infotainment on buses. It's about the customer engagement. And so, rewind a few years, we weren't talking about customers. We were talking about transit riders and just getting people from point A to point B. Now, really, you got to think about what's best for the customer, because ridership is down. You've got riders, with apps at their fingertips. And so, we as public serving agencies, you've got to be at the forefront of what people are thinking about. So, the purpose really is to get the customer to where they need to go. Forget about how that is. And so one of the things we think about at TripSpark is we need to rethink our partnerships. We need to focus on playing nice with competitors. We need to think about integration, because at the end of the day, a customer is going to choose what's best for them, forgetting about what technology it is. And so I think everybody has a hand in making sure that that destination and that journey is what's best for the customer and not what's best for their organization.
Bang on. Absolutely bang on. As a lifelong transit, prefer to use transit to go places. I think it's a real sea change in how we're doing this. Paul, what's your take on the whole microtransit mobility space?
Yeah, it's a great segue, Mike. Thanks for that. And it's been fun hanging out with you this year. I hope we can do some more traveling in the new year together to visit clients and things. So for me, it's funny. At the beginning of the year, Trish, you'll remember, I think our first guest of 2020 was Joshua Shank, who is the head of the Office of Extraordinary Innovation at LA Metro. And he talked about their microtransit pilot, which was at the time and still is, I think, the largest pilot in the country with 200 vehicles, et cetera. And he's proven prophetic. It really has become, I think, one of the hot trends. I mean, other hot trends are equity and inclusion, zero emission buses, et cetera, and getting passengers back on the bus. And part of the way to do that, as Mike Dukart just said, is reorienting what we're doing. It's not just necessarily about commuter services anymore. It's really about changing the dynamic of what we provide as an industry. So traditionally, our industry has been focused on the 9-to-5 commuter as the bulk of our riders. And then we add in some additional choice riders and then some midday people who have to get to social services. Well, the whole orientation changed during the pandemic because we were in a lockdown mode and people could not ride. The 9-to-5 commuters weren't allowed to ride. They had to work from home. A lot of them did in the big offices. And so now that they're coming back, transit agencies took that time to do what I call, a Simon Sinek moment. People who watch these TED Talks, et cetera, from him will realize, his big question is, what's the why about what you're doing? And I think our industry as a whole has decided that the why of what we're doing is really to provide access through mobility to all of life's opportunities for everyone in a region. And one of the ways to do that is through microtransit. Some of the great ways that agencies are using that now are first and last mile solutions, which was one of the things they thought about at the beginning, but they're still doing it. The guest that we interviewed recently at the TripSpark booth from Sarasota, Jane Grog, told us about that the people are using microtransit there for two things. First and last mile solution, which means getting from your home to the bus stop, getting from your home to the train station or the hub, and then back home, so that you don't have to actually put your car on the road, or you may not have a car, so it gets you from your house to there. And the other is getting you to direct destinations. The other thing she's done there, and many other people have done across the country, is they've found out that some of their fixed route bus routes don't have enough riders now to justify them making sense anymore. And so they're removing the bus routes from those routes, but they don't want to leave people kind of disenfranchised, like Aunt Irma still needs to get to her bridge game on Tuesday nights. And so we're going to send out this microtransit vehicle and a shared ride solution to take them where they need to go, even though it doesn't make sense to run a 40-foot bus 3 miles down a road to pick up just Aunt Irma. The other way that folks are using it is in MJ Maynard, our friend from RTC of Southern Nevada. They're expanding. They're using some of these new federal funds out of Washington, the ARPA funds, to actually go into areas where they've never had public transit before and to offer microtransit. It's basically, a shared ride system. It's not like a taxi ride where it's just you. It's picking up you plus the next person plus the next person. Your efficiency rating might be 3 passengers per hour, whereas a traditional paratransit route might be 1.2 in an urban area. And so you're getting more people on the vehicle. It's not just for people with disabilities. It's for everyone who can ride it. Our friend Robbie Makinen really was a leader in this in Kansas City when he kicked off Ride KC Freedom a few years ago, even before the pandemic. And now it's happening everywhere, Tris. So I think that's the trend that I think will continue into 2022. And we'll find new ways where it makes sense to use that. And the last thing I want to mention is that some places are even finding out that it's actually cheaper, less costly to run a microtransit vehicle than obviously the fixed route bus that would have served that. And that was part of the concern, right? Oh, the trip per passenger is going to be, the cost per passenger could be $20, whereas on a fixed route bus, on average, it's only $1. Yeah, but you're not taking into consideration the fact that if you're running a fixed route bus down a route which doesn't have enough passengers, your cost per passenger can end up being $30 an hour. It could be 50% more than a microtransit trip. And the microtransit trip provides door-to-door service, or at least curb to curb, whereas the fixed route means people may have to walk 3 blocks. So there is a place for that in our industry, and that's why so many agencies across the world now, but especially in Western Europe and in the United States and Canada, are piloting microtransit projects to see how does it fit into the overall portfolio of what a transit agency will offer.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, MJ Maynard, we come back to that fabulous set of interviews, but she highlighted that when they brought, bringing transit to a transit desert, that it was half running microtransit cost a lot of money, but it was half the cost of running a fixed route in that area. And related to what Jane Grog was saying, then this understanding of people's travel patterns is so amazing. She said, I guess they divided their area into zones, and there were a lot of people who just moved within a little zone, which I think is a change from the pandemic, where people are becoming, again, neighborhood focused. I mean, you realize when you're locked down and you can't go very far, right? You could you go to the store, you're going to like, oh, gee, there's a store right around the corner. I think that this all feeds into how our society is adapting and changing to this new mentality of, well, where do I need to go, when and why? And microtransit fits in so well to that.
Think about what microtransit addresses as well, right? Ridership over COVID has been down, right? Give new options to people, and that's what people want sometimes, just options, and that provides an alternative that allows ridership to increase, and we're starting to see it in the microtransit side.
And I would agree that, Tris, what you just said sort of parlays directly back to the whole idea of data, right? So, I mean, how do you analyze what's going to make more sense? You analyze the data, right? And jumping back to what Mike and Paul reiterated on, I think, the experience in front of the customer, when you talked about not making enemies and those sorts of things and playing nice in the sandbox, I think that, in this new world, you have to be agnostic to the solution that you're selling, but wide open to the solution that they need as a customer. And I think that's the difference you have to have. It's the only way you're going to be successful. The customer experience. When I ride a bus or a train with my son, he's 23. I just noticed, even just if we're taking the train into a football game or a hockey game, I noticed that customer ride is so different for both of us. I'm old school. I'm busy staring out the window, looking at all the things we're passing. He can tell me 23 things that were on the mode of transportation. He's looking at the infotainment screen. He's talking about the restaurant that they were advertising about. So, it's a very different experience that he's seeing. And I think that this microtransit addresses that too, right? I think you customize that rider experience that's sort of geographic centric. I think that's exciting too. And I think that's how you get the riders on board for sure.
Yeah, and to Elea's point about related to fare capping and equitable transit and easy access, I think microtransit opens up so many potential job opportunities to people, and the new mentality of getting access to jobs, getting access to healthcare, and giving people those options, education. These are the things that especially in the U.S. with the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was passed, I believe is truly a once in a generation funding opportunity that will change the face of public transport in the US, at least for another generation. And I think it's going to be a watershed moment for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Closing thoughts, Elea? Elea, do you have any closing thoughts?
I was just thinking about microtransit. I'm sitting here, in Silicon Valley, and I got all sorts of microtransit options zipping by me as we're talking right now, and that's very exciting. But really, what I get very excited about is when we start to extend it like into the Sarasota suburbs, and into these more, like Jane was talking about, and into these more areas, transit desert. Like, what a great phrase that is, into these areas that haven't had it before. And also, speaking from the Silicon Valley, capital of Silicon Valley here in San Francisco, human in the loop is a phrase that we use when we talk about trying to balance the real human needs and human input in AI and machine learning environments, and making sure that, that comes down to some real basic communication stuff like passenger surveys, and making sure that you're talking to real people instead of just endlessly massaging data until it becomes way too abstract to have anything to do with real riders.
And Tris, these are some of the hot topics that we're going to continue to cover in 2022.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not gonna tip our hand too much, but we've got a great set of shows going up through February, and I know these topics are going to keep coming up, and I want to and the three of you who aren't Paul and I hope to hear more and more of your insights and wisdom as we expand the voices in Transit Unplugged and start talking more and more about the changes. I think 2021 was amazing. I think we're going to look back this time next year and be like, wow, just wow, all the things that have happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. And if I could say one thing, I think this is the year-end show, and 2021 was another challenging year for transit. But I think we should tip our hat to all those out there who continue to, our frontline operators, those who make transportation a priority with passion. And that's why we're all here talking about it, because people still keep the wheels turning. And I'd like to thank every single person that's out there and that goes to work every day and continues to keep that, regardless of the mode that we think it's going to be. It's people that make it work. So thanks to all those that are doing that.
Well said, Mike.
Absolutely. Well said. Let's close it with there. That's good. I hope everyone has a great holiday season, and see you back in 2022. And that's a wrap. Thanks to all of you who've been listening to Transit Unplugged this year, and Paul and I would like to thank our guests this week, Elea Carey, Mike Bismeyer, and Mike Dukart, for giving us their opinions on what 2022 has in store for public transport. Now, as always, if you have a question, comment, feedback, or you'd like to be a guest on Transit Unplugged, feel free to email us anytime at info@transitunplugged.com. So until next time, next year, hope everyone has had a happy holiday, and ride safe and ride happy.